So something else that we have kind of unlocked, and I'm quite proud of some of the work that we've done on this, is really diving into the product experience and starting to map it out. Now, when I worked as part of marketing teams, like at Green and Blacks, we would occasionally do these consumer journeys, consumer journey mapping or shopper journey mapping, where you look at the journey that a consumer will go through in store, from first sort of identifying, picking it up, discovering, purchasing it, and going home, and then finishing with kind of experiencing the product. But that experiencing of the product, it sort of ended there. We didn't really have a deep dive into that. Whereas if you then do a map within the product experience, there's so many little steps that happen, from you get it out of the cupboard, you pick up the packaging, you open it, are you taking a bite from it? Are you pouring it into something? What are you pouring it into? You then share it, you pick it up, do you smell it first, do you eat it, etc. And it's interesting doing this exercise to map that out and then going back through it all, because it's different for every product. It's different for a beverage that might be served in a bar. It's different for a baby food that a mother is making for their baby. Has very unique sort of elements to each of, to a product. There are some brands that do an amazing job of spotting an element in that journey and increasing the value of the experience with either a bit of theatre or creating a ritual. The one example that springs to mind first is Guinness. And you look at when you order a pint of Guinness at a bar and it's poured in a certain way, and it takes 2 minutes because it has to be poured in this certain way. And actually, if you speak to people who work behind bars, you could just pour it in one and it doesn't make too much difference. Sorry, Guinness, but that's what I'm a big Guinness fan. But yeah, I think I've experienced it as well. When you've got a lazy barman and you think they've not poured it properly, and you're like, there's a good pint.
It's always a good pint.
But there's a couple of things there that are really great about that. And I think I'm going to bring up a couple of Rory Sutherland's sort of insights into how complexity can sometimes increase value. Because the first thing is you have to wait for your pints for 2 minutes. And if that was happening where they just poured it and gave it to you and you were sat with it in your hand, I could see people being a bit frustrated that I want to have a sip, but I've got to wait 2 minutes for it to settle before I'm supposed to drink it. Whereas the fact that it's happening behind the bar, and it's because it's going through this very specific pour and has to settle, and they're finishing it off with the tap being pushed the other way and so on, I think that turns it into anticipation rather than frustration. And it's similar to the point that Rory Sutherland made about Uber, in terms of when they first came about and that map appeared, which was very unique to kind of the booking a taxi experience, realised that people don't actually mind waiting for a taxi. But if you can see it's on the way and it's going to take 8 minutes, it changes the waiting experience. Because if you've just called them and after 5 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 minutes, it's still not there, it's that frustration. In terms of increasing how complexity can increase value, the other point that Rory makes is how if you were to buy a table from IKEA for £10, but it was already fully made, you would think it's probably a pretty cheap table. But the fact that you have to put it together yourself, the fact that there's that added complexity, actually increases the value. People probably think it's a £20 table, but it's the fact that you've got to make it yourself that sort of adds that that complexity. And so, hats off to Guinness that they've added some complexity, perhaps unnecessarily, but it instantly positions their products different compared to the competitive set. And they've turned that wait into anticipation rather than frustration.
Yeah.
I know one that you like to raise, Lulu, is the After Eight experience. And yeah, tell us about the After Eight game for the very few people who might not be aware of this at Christmas time.
I think it's that idea of building life into actually what a brand already is. And it's got so much more meaning than just a chocolate in a box. The nature that it's got this whole game around it that people play at Christmas, or it's a funny drunk game where you put it on your head and try and wangle it into your mouth. That if you just say the After Eight game, most people already know what it is without having to explain it. Building into the brand.
And whether that was by design or by accident, there's clearly an opportunity there that adds to the brand equity and can sort of live outside of the sort of typical product experience. Another example that Micah likes to make is around Maltesers. A box of Maltesers is a very different experience to a bag of Maltesers. That rattling sound is quite evocative, and people will sort of that increases value of the experience. And I know people, certainly my nan, would only have a box of Maltesers, and I'm pretty sure it's having it as the box that is part of that. A Tunnocks tea cake, and I saw this with Benedict's chocolates the other day. People unfold the foil and they flatten it out and they make a perfect square and they turn it into a shape, etc. And it sounds silly, but that is adding to the value, to the ritual of a product, and these things are quite important. And I don't know how often agencies sit down and try to discover these, and how many of them just happen actually by accident.
No, and that actually reminds me of my favourite as a kid, which is Kit Kat. How I can just remember still to this day, like being young, whether it's, I can't remember the exact age, but just that taking off that outer layer and just running your thumb down to split it, and then you open, whether it's intentional or not, that whole experience, I imagine it weren't, but
not to the extent that
exactly. They built a whole marketing campaign around it. Take a break, and it's even stamped on the bar itself.
Yeah,
and I just always loved that experience, and I think from an early age, I probably didn't know at the time, but that's why I loved the brand. I'd always go back to that product. It's just that sort of little, and it meant so much more. It's like whether you're at school, now when you're at work, it's just like just having that little bit of time to yourself, whether it's 5 minutes just to eat that bar of chocolate. And I don't think they actually have it anymore in the foil, but it's still always that memory what I've associated with that product still, just that opening experience, which I've always loved.
Yeah, you had one sort of similar.
Yeah, I suppose it's not always, because those are sort of emotional, like fun, joy increasing rituals in a way, but there can be like just functional innovation, I suppose, in a way too. And I think it's Pringles that were invented in the 50s or so, and the purpose was because people were complaining that crisp bags were, squashing them, they were going greasy and stale, and they were like, well, how can we build basically a bag of crisps or a packet of crisps, which like the structure will just like hold together. So they built the tube, and then I think they built the tube first and didn't really find a crisps to put in it for a while. Then someone else came along and kind of built the crisp and patented that as well. But that's...
Did you say it was a chemist?
I think it was a chemist, the original inventor of the idea, which is probably because Pringles aren't made of potatoes, are they?
They are, yeah. Well, I mean...
Sorry, Pringles.
It's obviously not sort of whole potatoes. It's
not whole foods.
But no, there's like potato starch and so on. They're good.
But yeah, they are good. They're very good. Yeah. And it's now obviously it's where the way that you eat them is also part of that. But it was like a piece of functional innovation, I suppose, as to how could you just improve.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And for more information, please visit tastehead.com. We hope you join us for our next episode.